Forbidden history. The story they never wanted you to hear. What if the Bible's most overlooked verse hides a civilization erased from memory? What if Cain, the first murderer, did not wander into emptiness, but into the heart of a thriving world already built outside Eden? What if the land of Nod was not wilderness at all, but the ruins of a forgotten people, a culture erased by theologians who could not reconcile its existence? Could it be that east of Eden lay the true beginning of civilization? Could it be that Cain's exile was not into nothingness, but into something greater, something terrifying? And this is where your journey begins. Tonight we step beyond the gates of the garden. We follow Cain, son of Adam and Eve, eastward. We ask the forbidden questions scholars hesitate to confront. Who did he marry? Who did he fear? Who lived there already? Because the text itself admits a mystery most preachers gloss over. Nod was not empty. Nod was a land. Nod was a people. Nod was a story. And we are about to uncover it. But before we go deeper, pause with me. If you hunger for mysteries erased by time, if you sense there is more to Genesis than Sunday school ever taught, then you belong here. Subscribe, like, and stay. Because the story you're about to hear may shake the very foundation of what you thought you knew about the Bible. Now, let's open the text. Genesis 4:16. Then Cain went out from the presence of the Lord and settled in the land of Nod, east of Eden. Simple, almost throwaway. But notice, Cain doesn't wander into barren wasteland. He settles, he builds, he establishes a city. Cities require people. Populations, families, craftsmen, builders. Who were they? Where did they come from? Were they part of the creation of Genesis 1, humanity in general, while Adam and Eve were part of Genesis 2, the priestly line chosen for covenant? The Hebrew gives clues. Nod comes from nud, to wander, to shake, to flee. A place of fugitives, a realm for the displaced. But why name it at all if Cain alone entered? Places receive names when communities already exist. Land of Nod implies recognition, a known boundary. If Adam's line were alone, the word should have been silence. Yet here is Nod, east, known, named, waiting. But the real shock is Cain's fear. In Genesis 4:14 he cries, "Whoever finds me will kill me." Whoever, not if, not maybe, whoever. He assumes others already roam the world. If Adam, Eve, and Cain are alone, this fear makes no sense. Unless Cain knew. Unless Cain had seen or heard of others outside the garden walls. Unless Eden was never the whole world, but one sacred center within a much broader human story. And this is where the word studies reveal more. When Genesis 2 describes Adam, the text says there was no man to avad the ground. Avad, to work, but also to serve, to minister. Adam was created for covenant, for priestly duty. He was not the first Homo sapiens, but the first priest of a cosmic temple called Eden, which means outside Eden, others already lived. Farmers, hunters, tribes, people who had not been called into covenant, but still bore the divine image from Genesis 1. Male and female, he created them. Adam was chosen, not unique. He was representative, not exclusive. That is why Nod existed. That is why Cain feared. That is why the story shatters the neat Sunday school version. Archaeology whispers in agreement. East of Eden, in the Fertile Crescent, rise the ruins of Göbekli Tepe. Massive stone circles, carved with animals, dated to 11,000 years ago. Not huts, not caves, temples, advanced, sacred. This is no wilderness of wandering. This is civilization. This is Nod. Could Cain's city have risen in the shadow of these stones? Could the builders of Göbekli Tepe be the others Cain encountered? Scholars marvel that such sophistication appears suddenly, with no gradual evolution. But what if it was sudden because it was forgotten? What if Cain joined those who remembered an older way? Baalbek, Lebanon. Stones weighing 800 tons, carved and moved by hands unknown. Puma Punku in Bolivia. Blocks so precise they defy modern saws. Egypt, pyramids aligned to the stars with staggering accuracy. Civilizations appear too quickly, as if knowledge was inherited, not invented. Could Nod be part of that inheritance? Could Cain's descendants, through Jubal and Tubal-Cain, carry forward music and metallurgy, not as discoveries, but as recoveries, gifts of a people east of Eden? And science adds another layer. Geneticists trace humanity not to a single couple, but to populations. Mitochondrial Eve lived around 150,000 years ago. Y-Chromosomal Adam, tens of thousands of years later. Not a pair, but a pattern. Not one family, but many branches. This aligns with Genesis 1's collective creation, and with Genesis 2's covenant Adam, which means the land of Nod could have been filled with parallel lineages, humanity outside the garden, watching, waiting, living, while one man in Eden bore the role of priest. But Cain's marriage seals the mystery. The text says he knew his wife in Nod, and she bore Enoch. If Adam and Eve alone birthed humanity, this is impossible, unless incest was assumed and ignored, which ancient writers rarely left unexplained, or unless Cain met a woman already living east of Eden, from the Genesis 1 creation, untouched by Eden's covenant. That possibility opens the forbidden truth. Cain's line and Adam's line were not identical. They were separate streams. Nod was the meeting point, and mythology remembers. The Sumerians spoke of Dilmun, a pure land eastward, where gods and men once met. The Greeks remembered Hyperborea, far away, filled with radiant people. Hindus spoke of cycles, golden ages, where beings lived longer, stronger, before corruption came. Egyptians told of Tepi, the first time, when gods ruled on earth. Could these be echoes of Nod? Could Cain's exile into Nod be the biblical fragment of a global memory? That humanity outside the sacred garden already built, already worshipped, already fell into shadow, which leads us to theology. Adam was chosen as first priest. Christ came as last priest. The first Adam lost the temple. The last Adam rebuilt it. But Cain is the bridge. Cain shows us that Adam's line was never alone, that humanity outside Eden always existed, that salvation was never about one bloodline, but about all people east and west, which means the gospel is not about a garden, but about a world. But here is the cliffhanger. Nod vanishes. After Cain builds a city, after his descendants flourish, the flood comes. No trace, no survival, or so the text says. But what if fragments remain? What if Nod's people left monuments in stone too great for water to erase? What if their knowledge bled into Egypt, Sumer, the Indus Valley? What if the lost civilization east of Eden is the missing chapter of human history? And what if Cain's fear, "Whoever finds me will kill me," was not paranoia, but prophecy? Because maybe Nod did not die. Maybe Nod survived in shadow. Maybe the civilization east of Eden still whispers in our myths, our ruins, our DNA. The story isn't over. The people Cain feared may still be with us. And in the next chapter, we will trace the ruins, the bloodlines, and the forbidden evidence that the land of Nod was no myth, but a civilization buried in plain sight. Forbidden history. It doesn't just whisper from the pages of Genesis. It rises from the stones beneath our feet. Archaeology, that silent witness of ages past, begins to shout when we listen carefully. What if the ruins scattered across the earth are not anomalies, but remnants of Cain's world? What if the land of Nod was not a desert of wandering, but a cradle of civilization whose fingerprints remain carved in stone? What if east of Eden lies the answer to humanity's first forgotten chapter? Think about this. Cain builds a city. The text in Genesis 4:17 doesn't say he pitched a tent or planted a field. It says plainly, he built a city and named it after his son Enoch. A city. The implication is staggering. A city requires infrastructure, houses, walls, roads. A city requires hierarchy, leaders, builders, laborers. A city requires population, far beyond Cain, his wife, and a few siblings. Could a solitary fugitive accomplish this? Or does the verse imply Cain joined an existing settlement, a proto-civilization east of Eden that welcomed, or feared, the arrival of the cursed wanderer? And here, archaeology steps onto the stage. In the hills of southeastern Turkey, Göbekli Tepe rises from the dust. Carbon dated to around 11,000 years ago, its circular enclosures of massive T-shaped pillars defy explanation. The stones weigh up to 20 tons each. They're carved with animals, lions, scorpions, vultures, etched in relief so precise they rival Renaissance art. Yet Göbekli Tepe predates agriculture, precedes pottery, appears suddenly, fully formed. Scholars call it the world's first temple. But could it also be the memory of Nod's civilization, preserved in stone? Notice the parallels. Cain's line is credited with the birth of music, metallurgy, urban life. Tubal-Cain works bronze and iron. Jubal fathers harp and flute. Jabal dwells in tents and raises livestock. These are not primitive cavemen. These are innovators, creators, pioneers. Exactly the kind of people who could carve lions into limestone. Exactly the kind who might build sanctuaries long before written language. But Göbekli Tepe hides a secret. It was deliberately buried. Not eroded, not abandoned, but covered under tons of earth, as if someone wanted it erased. Why? Why hide the first temple of humanity? Could this burial echo the curse of Nod? A civilization that flourished outside Eden, yet whose memory was suppressed, covered, forgotten. And Göbekli Tepe is not alone. Travel southwest to Baalbek, Lebanon. There, the trilithon stones, 3 blocks each weighing over 800 tons, rest at the base of the Temple of Jupiter. These stones are so massive that modern cranes cannot lift them. Engineers admit we cannot replicate their placement with today's technology without extraordinary effort. How did Bronze Age builders move them? Were they inheritors of a forgotten science? Remnants of Nod's people who preserved knowledge across the flood? The book of Genesis hints at such inheritance. When Cain's descendants flourish, they produce metallurgy, music, animal husbandry. These skills emerge not gradually but suddenly. Just like Göbekli Tepe, just like Baalbek, just like the pyramids. Too sudden, too advanced. It's as if humanity already knew, then rediscovered, then lost again. And then, look further. In South America, thousands of miles from Eden's lands, lies Puma Punku, part of the Tiwanaku complex in Bolivia. Here, H-shaped stones fit together with such precision that a razor blade cannot slip between them. Some blocks weigh 100 tons. They are carved with grooves and drill holes so exact they suggest machine tools. Yet according to official timelines, the builders had no wheel, no writing, no iron. So how? Why does advanced stonework appear suddenly, globally? Unless these were the echoes of an earlier world, a Nod world. But here's where it becomes even more mysterious. Many of these sites align with the stars. Göbekli Tepe's pillars match celestial patterns. The Great Pyramid of Giza aligns with Orion's belt. Stonehenge marks solstices with eerie precision. Across continents, across millennia, cultures, we are told, had no contact built monuments that map the heavens. Why? Could it be memory? Could Nod's people, east of Eden, have carried ancient knowledge of the skies, of mathematics, of geometry, and seeded it across the earth after Cain's exile? Genesis gives us a clue. Cain's punishment was to wander, to become a fugitive. But fugitives move. Fugitives spread knowledge. If Cain and his line carried secrets eastward, their legacy might ripple through time, surfacing as inexplicable genius in faraway lands. Music in Mesopotamia, metallurgy in Anatolia, monumental stones in Lebanon, sacred pyramids in Egypt, astronomical temples in Peru, a diffusion of wisdom from a forgotten center, a center named Nod. But modern archaeology resists. Scholars say there is no evidence of Cain's city. But how much has been erased? The flood narrative itself describes a cataclysm that destroyed civilizations. Noah's Ark preserves only a line, not a city. Yet flood myths echo worldwide. In Sumer, Utnapishtim survives a deluge. In Hindu texts, Manu builds a boat. In Mesoamerica, the gods send water to cleanse the earth. All remember destruction. All hint at survivors. Could Cain's city have been swept away? Could Göbekli Tepe, Baalbek, and Puma Punku be the scattered remains of Nod's knowledge, built by descendants who remembered fragments? And yet the Bible doesn't erase Cain entirely. It traces his line: Enoch, Irad, Mehujael, Methushael, Lamech. Names, genealogies, acknowledgement. Why record them at all if irrelevant? Unless their civilizations mattered. Unless their legacy shaped the world beyond Eden. Unless the very cities we marvel at today were echoes of Cain's builders. But here lies the haunting question. Were these people merely human? Or did they mingle with something else? Genesis 6 speaks of the sons of God taking daughters of men, producing Nephilim, giants, mighty men of old. Could Nod have been their cradle? Could Cain's fear, "Whoever finds me will kill me," hint at a race stronger, fiercer, already inhabiting the land? Were the Nephilim not a later corruption, but already present east of Eden, long before the flood? Look at the myths again. Sumerian tablets speak of the Anunnaki, those who came down from heaven. Greek myths recall titans, children of gods and mortals. Egyptian lore names the Shemsu Hor, followers of Horus, semi-divine rulers before the pharaohs. In Hindu traditions, Devas and Asuras walk among men. Different names, same memory. Could Cain's city have thrived among them? Could Nod be the hidden stage where humanity and these others first collided? And if so, what does that mean for us? Are we descendants of Adam alone, or of a broader human tapestry, woven from Eden's covenant line and Nod's forgotten civilizations? What if Adam was not humanity's beginning, but humanity's priest, chosen amidst many? What if the people of Nod were not cursed wanderers, but advanced builders, erased by flood and dogma alike? The stones whisper, the ruins shout, the myths echo. Nod may never have been empty. Nod may have been the first city of man, the first shadow of empire east of Eden. But here's the cliffhanger. If Nod was real, where is its heart? Where is the city Cain built? If Göbekli Tepe and Baalbek are fragments, could the true center still lie buried under Mesopotamian sands? Could Cain's city be the missing puzzle piece that links Adam's priesthood, Sumer's kings, and the myths of gods descending to earth? The story isn't over. In the next chapter we dive into genetics, the hidden record written not in stone, but in your blood. And the results may reveal that Nod's people never vanished at all. They may be part of you. Forbidden history. It's not only written in stone, it's etched in blood, etched in you, etched in me. Every cell in your body carries a record, a testimony, a library written in genetic code. And that code whispers of a past far stranger than we're told. Science calls it population genetics, but you and I know it as something deeper, a hidden book, a forbidden chapter. What if the very strands of DNA confirm what Genesis only hints at? What if the land of Nod isn't just myth, but memory, coded into our very existence? Start with the concept of mitochondrial Eve. Geneticists studying mitochondrial DNA, the part passed from mother to child, trace all living humans back to one common female ancestor. They call her Eve, not because she was the biblical Eve, but because she represents a lineage, a source. She lived roughly 150,000 to 200,000 years ago in Africa. But here's the catch. She wasn't the only woman alive. She was simply the one whose line survived. Other women existed. Other families existed. They vanished. She remained. Doesn't that sound eerily similar to the Genesis narrative? A single chosen lineage preserved, while others fade into silence. Now look at the Y-chromosomal Adam. Studies of the male line point to a common ancestor who lived between 60,000 and 300,000 years ago. But again, he wasn't alone. He wasn't the only man, just the one whose male line endured. Do you see the pattern? Humanity never began with a single couple alone. Populations existed, branches spread, some died out, some continued. Which means when Cain trembled, saying, "Whoever finds me will kill me," he wasn't hallucinating. He wasn't fearing ghosts. There were others outside Eden, others whose blood still runs in your veins. But here's where it becomes even more fascinating. When we map ancient genomes, we find traces of species that don't fit neatly into the picture. Neanderthals, Denisovans, ghost lineages. Humans today carry up to 2% Neanderthal DNA. Some populations in Asia and Oceania carry as much as 5% Denisovan DNA. What does that mean? It means we are not pure. It means our ancestors intermingled with other kinds of humans. And some of those kinds were strong, large, possibly giant. The Nephilim echoes again. Could the Neanderthals and Denisovans be the people of Nod? Could the biblical memory of others outside the garden be the cultural memory of encountering these parallel humans? Imagine Cain stepping east, marked by God, stumbling into a village of broad-boned, fire-eyed people. Not animals, not beasts, humans. But not his kind of humans. Stronger, wilder, already established in the land. Suddenly his fear makes sense. Suddenly his words are not paranoia but testimony. Whoever finds me will kill me. And think about this. Why does the Bible bother tracing Cain's descendants at all? If they were irrelevant, why name Enoch, Irad, Mehujael, Methushael, Lamech? Unless those names were remembered because they intermingled, because they left a genetic footprint, because the people of Nod are not gone. They are us. Modern science even uncovers evidence of ghost populations, unknown hominins, DNA signatures that don't match Neanderthals or Denisovans or modern humans. Entire lineages we've never identified, yet their code lingers in our blood. Who were they? Science has no name for them, but the Bible does. Nod, the forgotten, the feared, the hidden neighbors east of Eden. And here's the haunting part. These interminglings were not random. They shaped civilizations. Neanderthal DNA influences immunity, skin, even brain function. Denisovan DNA enhances oxygen use at high altitudes, explaining why Tibetan peoples thrive in mountains. These aren't minor quirks. These are survival traits passed through the ages. Traits that made us who we are. Traits that Cain may have encountered first. Now zoom out. Picture the timeline. Genesis 1 describes a broad creation. Male and female, he created them. A population, a humanity. Genesis 2 zooms in on Adam, formed from dust, placed in Eden, called to priesthood. Then Cain, cast out, meets others. This is the overlap. Science calls them populations. The Bible calls them people outside Eden. Same reality, two languages. Could it be that archaeology, genetics, and scripture are converging? Could it be that science is rediscovering what Genesis preserved in cryptic form? And what about the Nephilim? Genesis 6 tells of the sons of God who came into the daughters of men. Their offspring were giants, mighty men of old. What does genetics say? That ancient humans interbred with other beings. Larger, stronger, genetically distinct. Isn't that the same pattern? Isn't the Nephilim just another memory of interbreeding with others, whether divine or simply different? Could the land of Nod have been the contact zone? The frontier where these unions began? But here's the real question. Why does this matter to you? Because your DNA carries their signature. You are not a descendant of Adam alone. You are a tapestry of many lineages. You are a living museum of forgotten unions. And that should humble you, should shake you, should make you wonder, what really happened east of Eden? Think of Cain again, a wanderer, cursed. He enters Nod, a land alive with people. He takes a wife. His line flourishes. They invent metallurgy, music, tents, livestock. They build cities. They rise. And their blood mixes with others. Today, when scientists look into your genome, they don't see one origin. They see many. A chorus of ancestors. A chorus that may include Cain's Nodites, Adam's descendants, Neanderthals, Denisovans, and unknown ghost populations. So when we ask, who did Cain fear? The answer is not abstract. It's in you. It's in your veins. Cain feared people who became your ancestors. Cain feared the ones who shaped your body, your mind, your survival. He feared what you carry still. But here's the forbidden thought. What if some of those lineages were not merely human? What if the Nephilim were not a myth but a genetic reality? What if the blood of giants still flows in us, diluted but present? Science already shows ancient humans were taller, stronger, hardier. Could myths of titans, heroes, demigods be distorted memories of real hybrids, real unions that began in Nod? Could Goliath, centuries later, be an echo of Cain's neighbors? Could your family tree stretch further back than you imagine, into shadows of beings we barely comprehend? And if so, what does that mean for the image of God? Does carrying the blood of others diminish it? Or does it magnify the mystery that God's image was stamped on humanity so broadly, so inclusively, that even interwoven lineages carry divine spark? Could it be that Adam was chosen not to exclude others, but to reveal a calling meant for all? The science is clear. We are a mixture. The scripture is clear. Others existed. The memory is clear. Cain was not alone. And the conclusion? Haunting. You are Nod's descendant as much as Adam's. You are heir to both covenant and exile. You are both priest and wanderer. Both chosen and cursed. Both. Always both. But if this is true, then the flood story takes on new weight. Was it merely punishment for sin? Or was it a genetic reset? A cleansing of corrupted lineages, of unions gone too far? Genesis 6 says Noah was perfect in his generations. Could that mean not only morally upright but genetically untainted? Could the flood have been God's attempt to preserve a line in the midst of hybridization? And yet, if traces of Neanderthals, Denisovans, and ghost lineages remain in us today, then the purge was not complete. Which means Nod's people survived. Which means the land of Nod never vanished. Which means Cain's world flows in your veins right now. But here's the cliffhanger. If your blood carries Nod, then what about your soul? Does the mixture in your DNA reflect a mixture in your destiny? Could the land of Nod still shape not just who you are, but who you will become? And if the story of Cain and his people is written in you, then the question is not whether they survived. The question is whether they still speak. The story isn't over. In the next chapter, we explore the myths. Because science may trace your blood, but mythology preserves your memory. And the echoes of Nod appear not only in Genesis, but in Sumer, in Greece, in Egypt, in India. And together, they tell a story far bigger than Eden. Forbidden history. Echoes don't vanish. They mutate. They morph. They reappear under new names. Myths are not lies. They are memories in disguise. And the strange thing? When you line them up side by side, you realize they're all singing the same tune. Different cultures, different languages, same melody. Ask yourself this: why do civilizations separated by oceans, by centuries, by mountains and deserts, all tell stories of divine beings descending, of humans mingling with gods, of hybrid offspring who were mighty, terrifying, half human, and half something else? Why do they all remember a paradise lost? A golden age cut short? A flood that wiped the slate clean? Coincidence or conspiracy? Start with the Sumerians, the oldest written records we possess. They speak of the Anunnaki, those who from heaven to earth came. Powerful beings who bestowed knowledge, taught agriculture, introduced kingship. Sound familiar? Genesis speaks of the sons of God who came into the daughters of men. Two different texts, two different cultures, the same haunting theme. Beings from beyond mingling with humans, changing history forever. Was Cain's Nod a cradle of this contact? Was his city, the one he built after Abel's murder, a prototype of the civilization Sumerians later described as founded by gods? Now step westward, to Greece. The myths of the Olympians and the Titans echo the same pattern. Titans ruled in a golden age, only to be overthrown. Olympians intermingled with mortals, producing heroes like Hercules, Perseus, Achilles. Half god, half man. Does that not sound like the Nephilim? Mighty men of old, men of renown, as Genesis describes them. Could it be that Hercules was simply another name for what Hebrews remembered as Nephilim? That Nod's descendants were remembered in Greece as demigods? Egypt, the land of pyramids, of gods with animal heads, of pharaohs who claimed divine blood. They too preserved memories of beings who ruled before men, gods who walked the Nile Valley. Osiris, Isis, Horus, not merely deities of worship, but rulers, teachers, lawgivers. And every pharaoh called himself son of Ra, the child of a god, not fully human. The very structure of Egyptian monarchy rests on hybrid identity. And behind that, Nod again, east of Eden, where Cain met others, where hybridization began, where the line between divine and human blurred, India. The Vedic texts and Hindu epics overflow with tales of avatars, divine beings descending to earth in human form. Vishnu, Rama, Krishna, they walked among mortals, took wives, fathered children. They wielded powers beyond comprehension. They fought wars that shook heaven and earth. And they described ages, the Satya Yuga, Treta Yuga, Dvapara Yuga, golden ages lost through human corruption, ending in catastrophic resets. Tell me, how different is that from Genesis' tale of Eden, of Cain, of the flood? Could it be the same memory told with different symbols? But perhaps the most striking pattern is universal flood myths. Nearly every culture has one. Sumer, Akkad, Babylon, the story of Utnapishtim. Greece, the story of Deucalion. India, the story of Manu. Native Americans, Chinese, Africans, all recall a great deluge. Genesis describes Noah. The pattern is too consistent to ignore, which means the people of Nod, Cain's descendants, would have remembered it too. Their flood story may have been swallowed by Sumerian tablets, Greek poems, Hindu verses, but the root memory is the same. Now ask yourself, why do all these stories include giants? The Greeks had titans, the Hindus had the Asuras, the Norse had the Jotun, the Hebrews had Nephilim. Were these all inventions? Or were they distorted memories of actual beings, actual unions between humans and outsiders? Could the land of Nod have been the first place where such unions were normalized, where Cain's line mixed with others, where heroes of renown first emerged? Think of Lamech, Cain's descendant, who boasts of killing a man and a boy. He speaks with arrogance, as if violence was his inheritance. Then think of Cain, the forger of bronze and iron. Suddenly metallurgy appears. Then Jubal, father of music. Suddenly instruments appear. Then Jabal, tents and livestock. Suddenly pastoral life appears. How did Cain's line acquire so much so quickly? Did they simply invent it overnight? Or were they taught? By whom? Sumerians say the Anunnaki. Greeks say the Olympians. Hindus say the Devas. Hebrews say the sons of God. All of them telling the same forbidden truth. Cain's people did not rise alone. They were helped. By someone. By something. And here's where archaeology stirs. The megaliths, Göbekli Tepe, Baalbek, the pyramids, Puma Punku, all show sudden advanced knowledge at odds with primitive expectations. No trial and error, no gradual evolution, just sudden mastery. Is this the fingerprint of Nod? A lost civilization east of Eden, seeded with knowledge from beyond, rising rapidly, collapsing, then remembered only in myth? Even the Book of Enoch, a text banned from most Bibles, describes the Watchers, angels who descended, taught forbidden arts, married women, and produced giants. Their knowledge included weaponry, cosmetics, astrology, things meant to give power, beauty, control. And Enoch says these Watchers corrupted humanity. Doesn't that sound like the myths of Prometheus, who stole fire from heaven, or Hermes, who brought cunning arts? Always knowledge, always rebellion, always hybrid offspring, always chaos. Could it be that Nod was where the Watchers descended? That Cain's city was the first place they landed? That Nod became the birthplace of hybrid knowledge, hybrid blood, hybrid destiny? But here's the most disturbing question. What if these myths are not just echoes of the past, but warnings for the future? What if the same pattern repeats? What if forbidden knowledge always returns? Ancient Watchers gave metallurgy. Later they gave astrology. Now could they be giving technology, artificial intelligence, genetic editing, CRISPR, transhumanism? Are we repeating Nod, becoming once again the people east of Eden? Mixed, advanced, powerful, and cursed. Pause for a moment. Think of your world. Think of how quickly technology leaps now. Think of how knowledge spreads overnight. Doesn't it feel sudden, like something pushing us faster than natural progress? Could it be that the same ancient forces are still whispering, still guiding, still corrupting? Could Nod never have died, but simply gone underground, re-emerging in cycles, always bringing the same mixture of brilliance and destruction? And if myths worldwide preserve this memory, then your own culture's legends matter. They are not fairy tales. They are fragments of Nod. Listen closely, and you'll hear the same motifs. Divine human unions, knowledge from beyond, a golden age lost, catastrophe, and the longing to return, all pointing back east of Eden. All pointing to the land Cain feared but entered anyway. And so the story grows darker. Because if Nod was not myth but history, then every myth you know may be history too. The heroes, the giants, the gods. They may not be inventions. They may be distorted memories of Cain's neighbors, of the lost civilization east of Eden. But here's the cliffhanger. If Nod's people became the heroes and gods of myth, then what happened to them? Where did they go? Did they vanish in the flood? Did they survive, hidden, waiting? And what if they still exist today? Not as stories, but as powers moving silently behind the scenes of history? The story isn't over. In the next chapter, we'll dive into archaeology itself. Not just myths, but stones. Stones that cannot lie. Stones that bear witness to the civilizations that rose and fell east of Eden. And those stones tell us something terrifying. Nod may not be lost. It may be buried, waiting to be uncovered. Forbidden history, carved not in ink, but in stone. Because myths can be dismissed as stories. Words can be erased, rewritten, mistranslated. But stones? Stones endure. Stones whisper in silence. Stones testify across millennia. And when you listen to them carefully, when you read them not as ruins but as records, you begin to see a pattern that points east of Eden. A pattern that suggests Cain's nod was not just a legend, but a template for civilizations that would rise across the earth. Ask yourself this: why does humanity's first architecture, its first monuments, appear suddenly, fully formed, with no primitive prototypes behind them? Why do sites like Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, dated to 11,000 years ago, appear with such sophistication that they baffle archaeologists? Why do stones weighing tons, carved with animal reliefs and cosmic symbols, appear at a time when humans were supposedly still hunter-gatherers with sticks and fire? Who taught them geometry? Who gave them astronomy? Who whispered sacred design? Göbekli Tepe was not a village, not a farm. It was a temple. Massive T-shaped pillars arranged in perfect circles. Carvings of vultures, scorpions, lions, serpents. Alignments with the stars. A place of ritual, not survival. But here is the most haunting detail. It was deliberately buried. Someone covered it up under tons of earth, as if trying to erase it from memory. Who hides their greatest monument? Unless the knowledge it represented became dangerous. Unless it echoed Nod, the civilization east of Eden, that also carried forbidden knowledge. Then there is Baalbek, in Lebanon. On its acropolis sits the Trilithon, 3 stones weighing over 800 tons each, cut with surgical precision and placed on a foundation as if they were mere bricks. Even modern cranes strain at such weight. Yet these blocks were moved and positioned thousands of years ago. How? Why? And for whom? Some say Romans built atop it, but the foundation predates Rome by millennia. Others whisper it was the landing place of the gods, the gateway between heaven and earth. Could Baalbek have been another outpost of Nod's knowledge? Stone proof of a civilization touched by beings from beyond? Travel to Egypt. The Great Pyramid rises with uncanny perfection, aligned to true north with an error of mere fractions of a degree, encoded with mathematical constants, the value of pi, the golden ratio. Its base is a near-perfect square. Its stones, millions of them, fit together with joints thinner than a sheet of paper. No record of its construction exists. No trial and error, just sudden mastery. Scholars claim it was a tomb, but no body has ever been found in it. So was it truly a tomb, or was it a temple, a machine, a cosmic marker, a memory of Nod's sacred architecture transposed into the desert of Egypt? And what of Puma Punku, high in the Andes of Bolivia? Here, stones shaped like giant interlocking puzzle pieces lie scattered, each cut with precision so fine you would need diamond tools to replicate it. Angles are exact, surfaces smooth, edges crisp, and the stone itself, andesite, harder than steel. How did pre-Columbian cultures achieve this? With stone hammers? Impossible. Puma Punku is not trial and error. It is engineering at a level we barely comprehend. Could this have been another echo of the Nodite civilization, spread across continents, repeating the same pattern of sudden brilliance, sudden collapse? And then Tiwanaku, nearby. Its gateway of the sun is carved with astronomical alignments that track solstices and equinoxes. The figures upon it resemble deities holding staffs, flanked by winged beings. The message is unmistakable. This was not just architecture. It was cosmology, theology, astronomy, all woven into stone. But who gave that knowledge? Where did it begin? Could it have begun in Nod? Even the Americas preserve these mysteries. In Mexico, Teotihuacan spreads in geometric perfection. The Pyramid of the Sun, the Pyramid of the Moon, the Avenue of the Dead. built by an unknown people, abandoned long before the Aztecs arrived. Its alignments track celestial cycles. Its proportions mirror those of the Great Pyramid in Egypt. How could two cultures, separated by oceans, construct monuments with the same cosmic design? Unless they were drawing from a shared memory. Unless the blueprint came from a forgotten source. Unless that source was Nod. Archaeologists shrug and speak of independent invention. They say human beings everywhere just happen to align temples with stars, just happen to move 100-ton stones, just happen to encode mathematics in monuments. But is that believable? Or is it more plausible that a lost civilization, older than Sumer, older than Egypt, older even than Göbekli Tepe, spread its influence across the earth, leaving fingerprints in stone? Could Cain's city, east of Eden, have been the first spark of this global pattern? Even more haunting is the repetition of themes. Sacred architecture aligned with stars. Temples designed as microcosms of the heavens. Stones arranged to symbolize cosmic order. This isn't just building, it's theology in stone. Nod was not just a city. It was a prototype temple, a place where Cain's descendants mixed with outsiders, received forbidden knowledge, and built monuments not only to mark space, but to mirror the cosmos. And the echoes of that template stretch from Lebanon to Bolivia, from Turkey to Mexico. And consider this: many of these sites are associated with catastrophes. Göbekli Tepe buried, Puma Punku shattered, Baalbek partially destroyed, Teotihuacan abandoned. The pattern is consistent: rise, brilliance, collapse. As if these civilizations were always cut short. As if they carried something too dangerous to endure. As if humanity was not allowed to keep what Nod had once possessed. But here is the terrifying possibility. What if the knowledge wasn't lost? What if it was hidden? Preserved in secret societies, in esoteric traditions, in whispers passed down through priesthoods. What if the builders of Baalbek, the architects of Egypt, the engineers of Puma Punku, all drew from the same hidden stream of knowledge? Knowledge that survived the flood, survived the collapse, and still influences our world today. Could this be the legacy of Nod? And then there's the timing. Göbekli Tepe dates to 9600 BCE, eerily close to Plato's date for the fall of Atlantis. The flood stories converge around the same era. The sudden rise of agriculture happens then. Civilization leaps forward. Could all of these be connected? Could Atlantis, Nod, Göbekli Tepe, the flood, all be fragments of one story, one forbidden history? Pause here. Feel the weight of stone. It's not just architecture, it's testimony. A silent witness to a chapter of human history erased from books, but etched into the earth. A chapter that began east of Eden. But the stones raise one more haunting question. Why are we rediscovering them now? Why is archaeology uncovering Göbekli Tepe, Baalbek's secrets, Puma Punku's puzzles only in our time? Why are we the generation allowed to see what was hidden for millennia? Could it be that the cycle is returning? That the knowledge of Nod is resurfacing? That humanity is once again standing at the threshold of forbidden knowledge? The story isn't over, because if stones are witnesses, then genes are records. In the next chapter, we will dive not into ruins, but into DNA, into the blueprint of humanity itself. And there, in mitochondrial strands and Y chromosomes, lies evidence that may connect you, right now, to the people of Nod. Evidence that Cain's neighbors weren't just myths, but ancestors, forbidden history, not only buried under stone, but encoded in you, in your cells, in your blood, in the spirals of DNA that wind like ancient scrolls within every human body. Because what if the greatest witness to Nod's existence isn't found in ruins or myths, but in the very code that makes you human? What if science itself has uncovered whispers of Cain's neighbors, people who lived, loved, fought, and vanished outside the garden. Ask yourself, why do genetic studies point not to a single pair of humans, but to entire populations? Why does science insist humanity came from thousands, not two? Why does the story in your biology echo the possibility that Adam and Eve were chosen, not alone? Could the secrets of Nod be written in your DNA? Let's start with mitochondrial DNA, the strand passed down from mothers to children, generation after generation. When scientists traced it backward, they found all humans share a common maternal ancestor, mitochondrial Eve. But here's the key. She didn't live 6,000 years ago. She lived perhaps 150,000 to 200,000 years ago in Africa. And she wasn't the only woman alive at the time. She was simply the one whose line survived. So if Adam's Eve in Genesis lived a few thousand years ago, who was this older Eve? Could she be one of the women outside Eden? Could she be part of the population Cain feared? Now turn to the Y chromosome. Every male carries it, passed from father to son. Traced backward, it leads to Y-chromosomal Adam. But the dates don't match mitochondrial Eve. He lived 60,000 to 300,000 years ago. Different era, different place. Not a couple. Not Adam and Eve as Sunday schools imagine. Instead, two separate markers of vast populations. Could this be the scientific fingerprint of Genesis 1, the creation of male and female humanity as a whole? And then Genesis 2 introduces Adam, not as the first biological human, but as the first covenant human, placed in Eden's sacred role. But the plot thickens. Because humanity is not pure. You and I, most of us, carry fragments of DNA from other beings. Neanderthals, Denisovans, ghost populations lost to history. When scientists sequenced Neanderthal DNA, they discovered modern humans interbred with them. Today, Europeans and Asians carry about 2% Neanderthal DNA. Melanesians carry up to 5% Denisovan DNA. What does that mean? It means there were others. Other humans walking the earth at the same time. Not beasts, not myths. Real people with real cultures. People outside Eden. And think about this. Cain's fear suddenly makes sense. Whoever finds me will kill me. He knew he wasn't alone. He knew others existed beyond the garden. He knew Eden was a sanctuary, not the whole world. Genetics agrees. Multiple populations, interbreeding, diversity from the very beginning. Could those outside people be the same ones science now calls Neanderthal, Denisovan, or even more mysterious groups still unnamed? Even more shocking, the Denisovans, discovered only from a finger bone and a few teeth in Siberia, turn out to have been highly advanced. Their DNA reveals adaptation to high altitudes, allowing modern Tibetans to breathe in thin air. Their technology? Jewelry carved with precision, stone tools sophisticated for their era. Who taught them? Were they descendants of the broader Genesis 1 creation? Did they interact with Nod, Cain's descendants, sharing knowledge that would later echo in civilizations? But there's more. Modern DNA studies suggest ghost populations, groups of ancient humans we don't even have fossils for. Yet their DNA lingers in us like whispers from the past. Entire civilizations erased. Their only trace a genetic footprint in your blood. Could one of these ghost groups be the people of Nod? Could their genes still live in you? Now let's bring theology into this. The Bible says Adam was formed because there was no man to work the ground. The Hebrew avad, work, serve, worship. Adam was created as a priest, which means others may have already existed, but Adam was chosen for covenant, not survival. Science aligns with this in a startling way. Populations existed, cultures thrived, but one man, Adam, was called. Not first human, but first priest. Not the beginning of biology, but the beginning of theology. Ask yourself, could modern genetics and ancient scripture be telling the same story from different angles? Could the science of DNA and the poetry of Genesis be two halves of the same truth? Could Cain's nod and science's ghost populations be the same mystery viewed through two lenses? Think about Neanderthals again. We picture them as brutish cavemen. But archaeology paints a different story. They buried their dead with flowers. They crafted tools with purpose. They made art, carving abstract designs into bone and stone. They controlled fire, hunted in coordinated groups, even may have spoken language. These aren't beasts. These are brothers, image bearers. Outside Eden, but fully human. And yet they vanished. Why? Disease? Climate? Or did something else happen? Something tied to the flood, to the cleansing of corrupted knowledge, to the forbidden history of Cain's line. And what of the Denisovans? A people almost erased, but their genetic legacy is stronger in some of us than in others. Their DNA enhances immunity, altitude tolerance, metabolism. As if their traits were selected for survival, as if their gifts were meant to last. Could this be why Cain feared them? Not because they were monsters, but because they were powerful, because they were different, because outside Eden, life was raw, dangerous, primal. Then there's you. Did you know you carry the past in your body? Your genome is a mosaic of all who came before. Every fragment of Neanderthal or Denisovan DNA in you is a memory of forgotten unions, forgotten encounters. When Cain walked into Nod, he wasn't stepping into emptiness. He was stepping into a world of diversity, complexity, danger, and perhaps wisdom. Could that wisdom have been the spark that led him to build a city? Could intermingling with outsiders have ignited the first flame of civilization? Genetics even hints at population bottlenecks, moments when humanity almost went extinct, reduced to a few thousand. Was one of these the Great Flood? Did Noah's family preserve one line while others vanished? Yet even after bottlenecks, the genetic echoes remain, like shadows in your cells. Science says you carry more ancestors than you can imagine. Theology says you carry the image of God. Put them together, and you see a mystery. The divine image stamped upon a diverse, interwoven human family. And so Cain's fear takes on new meaning. He wasn't paranoid. He wasn't delusional. He knew the world outside Eden teemed with others. Population science has confirmed. People with their own strength, their own culture, their own survival. Nod wasn't emptiness, it was encounter. And in your very DNA, the encounter continues. But this genetic story raises a haunting question. If science confirms multiple human populations, then who were the sons of God in Genesis 6, who took the daughters of men? Were they simply other human tribes? Or were they something else entirely? Were they divine beings crossing boundaries, mingling their essence with human bloodlines, creating hybrids remembered as Nephilim? And if so, could some of the strange anomalies in your DNA, ghost populations, mysterious mutations, be their lingering fingerprint? Pause. Let that sink in. You carry mystery in your body. Proof of others. Proof of encounters. Proof of forgotten peoples who lived outside Eden. Proof that the land of Nod was never empty. But this isn't the end. Because myths across the world echo the same story. Myths of gods mingling with humans. Myths of golden ages and lost civilizations. Myths of hybrid beings who were half divine, half human. And they might all be describing the same thing. Cain's Nod. The story isn't over. Because next, we must step beyond science and into myth. In the next chapter, we'll travel across cultures, Sumerian, Greek, Hindu, Egyptian, and see how every one of them remembers a time when the gods walked among men. And we'll ask, were they gods, or were they Cain's neighbors? Were they the lost people of Nod? Forbidden history, whispered not only in scripture, but in the myths of nations. Because what if every culture on earth has been remembering the same event in different tongues? What if the people Cain feared were also the gods, heroes, and giants celebrated in legends across the world? Could the stories of Nod have survived, not in the Bible's mainline narrative, but in scattered myths that refuse to die? Think about it. Why do so many cultures, separated by oceans, divided by time, speak of a golden age, a fall, a flood, and a world where divine beings mingled with mortals? Why are there echoes of Eden in Mesopotamia, Atlantis in Greece, Satya Yuga in India, Tepi in Egypt? Why do they all remember a time when the gods walked among men? Could it be because they were all remembering Nod? Start with Sumer, the world's first civilization, born in the Fertile Crescent, east of Eden. Their tablets describe beings called the Anunnaki, who came down from heaven to earth. They were not mere gods in the abstract. They were rulers, teachers, bringers of knowledge. They introduced agriculture, writing, astronomy, kingship. Does that sound familiar? Cain, east of Eden, suddenly building a city. Could it be that Nod's people had already developed knowledge, already lived in settlements, already ruled with divine-like authority? Could Cain's city have been part of this Sumerian memory? Now cross to Greece. Their mythology speaks of the Titans, beings of enormous power, older than the Olympians, who once ruled the world. They gave birth to demigods, half-divine heroes who walked among mortals. Hercules, Perseus, Achilles, figures of impossible strength, born from human mothers and divine fathers. Genesis 6 speaks of the sons of God and the daughters of men, whose union produced Nephilim, mighty men of old, men of renown. The language is almost identical. Mighty men, heroes, men of renown. Could the Nephilim of Eden's Edge and the demigods of Greece be the same beings remembered in different traditions? Then look at India. Hindu texts describe vast cycles of time, Yugas, each beginning with an age of purity, when gods walked with men. In the Satya Yuga, beings of immense stature and knowledge guided humanity. Later ages saw decline, corruption, the mixing of gods with mortals, and finally, catastrophe. Sound familiar? Genesis describes Eden's purity, Cain's corruption, divine beings mixing with humans, and then the flood. India remembers the same arc: harmony, corruption, cataclysm. Could Cain's Nod have been part of this forgotten cycle? And Egypt. Their myths tell of Tepi, the first time when gods ruled directly on earth. Thoth gave writing, Osiris taught agriculture, Horus guided kingship. The pharaohs claimed divine blood, sons of gods and men. The pyramids, aligned with the stars, hint at knowledge not fully understood. Were the pharaohs preserving a memory of a time when hybrids, part human, part divine, once ruled? Was Nod one of the centers of this first time? Notice the parallels. Every culture remembers beings who weren't fully human, who brought knowledge, who built civilization, who sometimes corrupted mankind. Every culture remembers a golden beginning that ended in disaster. Every culture remembers floods, wars of gods, catastrophic ends. Could these be echoes of Cain's Nod, the land outside Eden where other people already existed, where divine beings crossed boundaries, where knowledge both elevated and corrupted humanity? But let's push deeper. Why do myths everywhere describe giants? In Sumer, the Apkallu. In Greece, the Titans. In India, the Asuras. In the Bible, the Nephilim. In Native American traditions, the giant people whose bones were said to be buried in mounds. Even Norse mythology speaks of Jotnar, the giants who warred with the gods. Why giants? Everywhere. Could it be that the offspring of divine human unions really existed? Could they be Cain's allies or Cain's enemies in Nod? Ask yourself, why would separate cultures invent the same idea? Why would Egyptians, Sumerians, Greeks, Hindus, and Hebrews All speak of beings both human and divine, both rulers and corruptors. Unless they weren't inventing, unless they were remembering, unless Nod was real, and its legacy spread through every culture on Earth. And what about Atlantis? Plato's legend of a lost civilization, advanced in knowledge, destroyed by flood. Scholars dismiss it as allegory. But what if Atlantis was just another name for Nod? A memory of a people outside Eden who built cities, developed knowledge, grew powerful, but fell into corruption and violence. Remember Genesis 6. The earth was filled with violence. That's why the flood came. Could Atlantis, Tepi, the Golden Age, Satya Yuga, all be fragments of the same memory? The destruction of Nod's world? Now let's look at one more layer. The Bible's silence on Nod is deafening. We're told Cain feared others. We're told he married. We're told he built a city. But who these others were, where they came from, what culture they carried, the text is almost mute. Yet the world's myths refuse to be silent. They fill in the gap with echoes. Could it be that God left hints in global memory, scattered across languages and myths, so that the truth of Nod would never fully disappear? But here's the question that should haunt you. If Cain integrated with these outside peoples, if his descendants absorbed their knowledge and corruption, then what was preserved after the flood? Did fragments of Nod's civilization survive? Do the pyramids, Baalbek's megaliths, Göbekli Tepe's carved stones, all carry knowledge first born in Nod? And if so, what does that mean about the world we live in now? Could we still be walking in the shadows of Cain's neighbors? And yet the story doesn't end with myths. Because if Nod's legacy echoes in every culture's stories, then its fingerprints should also remain in stone, in megaliths, in monuments, in alignments with stars, in impossible constructions that scream of forgotten civilizations. And so the question becomes, what did the people of Nod build? What did they leave behind? And why does their work still defy explanation today? The story isn't over. In the next chapter, we will turn to archaeology. We'll walk among the stones of Göbekli Tepe, Baalbek, Puma Punku, and the pyramids. We'll ask, were these really the works of primitive farmers or the legacy of Cain's neighbors? Were these the monuments of Nod, forbidden history, carved in stone, buried under sand, hidden in the foundations of civilizations we barely understand? What if the ruins we marvel at today aren't the first attempts at human architecture, but echoes of a far older world? What if the people Cain feared, the inhabitants of Nod, were the true builders of some of the most mysterious sites on Earth? And what if their handiwork still stands, staring us in the face, while scholars insist on explanations that never quite fit? Let's start with a place scholars call the world's first temple, Göbekli Tepe, in modern-day Turkey. A site older than Stonehenge by 6,000 years, older than the pyramids by 7,000. Radiocarbon dating places it at 11,000 years ago, long before agriculture was supposed to exist, long before civilization as we define it. And yet here are massive stone pillars, carved with precision, arranged in perfect circles. Animals etched into stone with exquisite detail. The pillars weigh up to 20 tons. How were hunter-gatherers supposed to carve, transport, and erect them? Why would nomads build a temple? And why, after centuries of use, was the entire site deliberately buried under tons of earth? Could Göbekli Tepe be a remnant of Nod's people? A sacred complex east of Eden, sealed away when their world fell, now travels south, to Lebanon, where stand the ruins of Baalbek. At its heart is the Trilithon, 3 stones, each weighing over 800 tons, fitted perfectly into a wall. Engineers today would struggle to move them, even with modern cranes. Ancient Romans built temples on top of Baalbek, but they admitted the foundation stones were already there, from a time before memory. Who moved stones that size? Why? Could it have been the people Cain feared? Giants of old with knowledge of engineering we've lost? Could Baalbek's foundations be the literal stones of Nod, the very city Cain built east of Eden, preserved in myth as a place of gods? Next, look to Egypt. The Great Pyramid of Giza stands not just as a tomb, but as a riddle, perfectly aligned to true north, within 1/15 of a degree. Its base nearly level to within fractions of an inch. The internal chambers display complex acoustic properties. Its geometry encodes pi, the golden ratio, even the circumference of the Earth. How did Bronze Age Egyptians, supposedly just learning to work copper tools, achieve such perfection? Why does the pyramid appear in history fully formed, with no prototypes, no trial and error structures leading up to it? Could the knowledge have come from elsewhere? From Nod's civilization, preserved after the flood, encoded in stone to ensure it was never forgotten. And then there is Puma Punku in Bolivia. High in the Andes, 12,000 feet above sea level, lie ruins that defy explanation. Blocks of andesite and diorite, stones so hard they rival granite, cut with laser-like precision, interlocking with complex geometries. Some weigh over 100 tons. The H-shaped stones look like prefabricated Lego blocks, designed to fit together seamlessly. And yet Puma Punku is thousands of years old. Mainstream archaeologists say it was built by primitive cultures with stone tools. But look closely. Perfect right angles, drill holes, and machine-like cuts say otherwise. Who were these builders? Why does their technology appear advanced, only to vanish suddenly? Could Puma Punku be a surviving footprint of the people east of Eden, their skills echoing across continents? Notice the pattern. Across the world, sites appear that shouldn't exist. Built too early, too precise, too massive, too sophisticated for their time. Each one carries whispers of a forgotten civilization. Each one raises the same questions. Who built them? Where did the knowledge come from? Why did it vanish? And why do so many of these monuments carry astronomical alignments, tracking solstices, equinoxes, the movements of Orion, Sirius, the Pleiades? Were the builders not only engineers but astronomers, priests, watchers of the heavens? Now link it back to Scripture. Cain built a city in Nod. But how? According to the Genesis timeline, humanity was barely beginning. Where did he learn city planning? Masonry? Metallurgy? Genesis 4 names his descendants as founders of music, metallurgy, agriculture, skills too advanced for a single wandering family. Unless he joined with a people who already possessed knowledge. Unless the inhabitants of Nod were already builders, already engineers, already astronomers. Unless Cain's city was part of a civilization whose fragments we now call Göbekli Tepe, Baalbek, the pyramids, Puma Punku. And here's the chilling question. Why were these sites buried, destroyed, abandoned? Göbekli Tepe deliberately entombed. Puma Punku shattered as if by cataclysm. Baalbek reused but never explained. The Great Pyramid sealed with mysteries unsolved. Could it be because God's judgment, the flood, wiped out their world, leaving only ruins? Could Cain's Nod have been erased, but not completely, its memory frozen in megaliths that modern science cannot dismiss? But archaeology is only one layer. If Nod's people truly existed, their legacy should not just be in stone. It should be in us, in our DNA, in the very blood we carry. And here is where science begins to whisper the same story the Bible hints at. Because when geneticists trace our origins, they find not a single beginning, but many lineages. Not one first couple, but overlapping groups. Mitochondrial Eve, Y-Chromosomal Adam, Neanderthals, Denisovans, hybrids. Branches of humanity interwoven, not from one pair alone. Could it be that modern genetics is uncovering the same truth Genesis implied? That there were others outside Eden? That Cain's nod wasn't empty, but alive? The story isn't over. In the next chapter, we'll explore genetics and modern science. We'll ask, do the shadows of Nod still run in our veins? Are we carrying the legacy of the people east of Eden in our DNA? And if so, what does that mean for who we are? Forbidden history. Written not in stone this time, but in flesh, in your blood, in the cells of your body. Because what if the deepest evidence of the people Cain feared isn't only in ruins scattered across the earth, but inside you right now? What if science, the very discipline thought to contradict the Bible, is actually uncovering hints of the very story Genesis whispers? That humanity's beginning was not simple, not singular, but layered, complex, mysterious. Let's start with the most famous discoveries of modern genetics: mitochondrial Eve and Y-chromosomal Adam. The headlines made it sound simple. One woman, one man, the ancestors of us all. But the details are more complicated and more fascinating. Mitochondrial Eve, the woman from whom all living humans inherit mitochondrial DNA, lived about 150,000 to 200,000 years ago in Africa. Y-chromosomal Adam, the man from whom all men inherit their Y chromosome, lived perhaps 60,000 to 300,000 years ago. But here's the shock. They didn't live at the same time. They weren't a couple. They weren't Adam and Eve in the Sunday school sense. They were just the most recent common ancestors along specific genetic lines. So what does that mean? It means humanity was never just one pair. There were always many. Populations, tribes, peoples living side by side. The lineages of mitochondria and Y chromosomes eventually converged, but the people alive then were not alone. This aligns eerily with the biblical puzzle. Genesis 1's broad creation of mankind, Genesis 2's zoom in on Adam, Genesis 4's people outside Eden. Science and scripture, two different languages, describing the same mysterious reality. Now consider the startling revelations of interbreeding. You carry it in your genome. If you are of European or Asian descent, up to 2 to 4% of your DNA is Neanderthal. If you are of Melanesian or Aboriginal descent, 4 to 6% of your DNA is Denisovan. These weren't separate species who vanished. They live on in us. Their blood is our blood. Their genes are our genes. They were human, but not exactly us. They were other. Could these be the shadows of Nod? The others outside Eden, interwoven with Adam's descendants after Cain fled eastward? Could the people Cain feared have been Neanderthal bands, Denisovan tribes, or hybrid groups living beyond the garden? And here's the haunting detail. Cain's fear makes sense in this light. "Whoever finds me will kill me," he said. If the world outside Eden was empty, the statement is nonsense. But if Adam's covenant family existed alongside other human groups, ancient populations now confirmed by genetics, then Cain's terror becomes rational. He was stepping into their territory, into their world, into Nod. Modern archaeology and genetics converge here. The skeletons we unearth tell the same story. Neanderthals buried their dead with flowers, pigment, ornaments. Denisovans left traces of jewelry, carved bones, advanced tools. These weren't beasts. They were people. Intelligent, creative, spiritual. Different, yes, but human. And their disappearance isn't simple extinction. They live on through us, through you. Could it be that Adam's line and Nod's people merged, producing the mosaic of humanity we see today? But the mysteries go deeper. Geneticists now speak of ghost populations, groups of ancient humans whose DNA lingers in us, though their bones have never been found. Entire civilizations lost to history, remembered only in fragments of our genome. Africa, in particular, shows evidence of mysterious archaic admixture. Genes that don't match Neanderthals or Denisovans. Genes from an unknown lineage. Who were they? Could they be the forgotten peoples east of Eden, erased from scripture but preserved in blood? And then there is the puzzle of rapid human development. Around 50,000 years ago, humanity leapt forward. Suddenly art exploded. Cave paintings, sculptures, musical instruments, language, symbolic thought, complex tools. Archaeologists call it the Great Leap Forward. But why then? Why so suddenly? Some suggest genetic mutation. Others say population pressure. But could it be something else? Could it be the intermingling of Adam's covenant line with Nod's peoples, blending divine calling with diverse human ingenuity? Could this fusion explain the sudden spark of civilization? Now look at the book of Genesis again with this lens. Chapter 6 speaks of the sons of God taking the daughters of men, producing mighty men of old, men of renown. Scholars debate whether this refers to angels or simply powerful rulers. But what if it reflects the same reality genetics now uncovers? Lines intermingling, producing hybrid vigor, powerful offspring who changed history. Could the Nephilim be remembered in both science and scripture as evidence of mixing between covenant humanity and the broader human family of Nod? Think about what this means for you personally. The DNA in your body is not just a random code. It is history. It is memory. It carries the record of interbreeding, migration, survival. It whispers of encounters long forgotten, of unions across tribes, of worlds colliding east of Eden. You are living proof that the people Cain feared were real. Because their blood runs in you. Their story lives in you. Their legacy is you. But the question remains, what were they like? What did they believe? Did they remember Eden from afar? Did they have myths, rituals, sacred sites? Genetics gives us fragments, but the myths of the world may give us more. Because cultures everywhere tell of the others, of gods and men intermingling, of golden ages lost, of people erased. Sumerian, Greek, Hindu, Egyptian. They all preserve echoes of a time when humanity was more than one family, when the world was shared between Adam's line and Nod's peoples. And so we stand on the brink of synthesis. The Bible, archaeology, genetics, mythology, all pointing to the same conclusion. Humanity was never singular. Adam was chosen, not alone. Eden was unique, not universal. Cain feared others, because others existed. And you are their heir. You are the living testimony that the forbidden history is true. But the story isn't over. In the next chapter, we'll dive into cross-cultural mythology. We'll ask, do the legends of gods and giants, the Golden Age and the Fall, the Watchers and the Flood, all preserve the memory of Cain's world east of Eden? And if so, what forbidden truths have been hiding in plain sight, waiting for us to piece them together? Forbidden history. Echoes not only in DNA, not only in stone, but in myth. Stories carved into memory. Legends whispered by firelight. Tales told across oceans and mountains, carrying fragments of a forgotten past. Could it be that the people Cain feared, the civilization east of Eden, still speak to us today? Not in scripture, not in archaeology, but in the myths of every culture? Think about it. Why do so many cultures tell of a golden age? Why the universal memory of gods walking among men, of a paradise lost, of a flood that swept away the world? Why the recurring figures of giants, hybrids, watchers, beings half divine, half human? Is this coincidence, or is it memory? Let's begin in Sumer, the cradle of civilization. The Sumerians told of the Anunnaki, divine beings who came from the heavens, teaching humanity arts, agriculture, kingship. They described the building of cities under divine instruction, the ordering of society, the introduction of writing. And here's the mystery. The timeline of Sumer aligns uncannily with what genetics calls the Great Leap Forward. Did the Anunnaki represent Nod's people remembered as gods? Outsiders with knowledge, mingling with Adam's descendants, producing the spark of civilization. Now shift to Greece. The Greeks spoke of the Titans and the Olympians, of gods who ruled the earth before being cast down, of mortals who mingled with divinity to produce heroes, Heracles, Achilles, demigods of impossible power. Are these echoes of Genesis 6? The Nephilim born when sons of God took daughters of men? Could these demigods be distorted memories of hybrid offspring? Offspring of Adam's line and Nod's peoples, remembered as mighty men of old? In Egypt, the gods were said to have ruled directly over humanity in the Tepi, the first time. They brought order out of chaos, built monuments, taught laws. Pharaohs were their descendants, divine kings in flesh. And again, we see the pattern. Beings of higher wisdom intermingling with humans, leaving behind knowledge encoded in stone. Is this not the same story told east of Eden? Cain building a city, Cain's descendants forging tools, making music, creating civilizations, guided by forces both human and beyond? Look eastward still, to Hindu tradition. The ancient Vedas speak of cycles of time, of ages when the devas walked openly among men. They describe avatars, divine beings descending into human form, bridging heaven and earth. They tell of giants, the Daityas and Danavas, who opposed the gods, just as the Nephilim opposed the divine order. Could the land of Nod, east of Eden, have been one of these remembered ages, a time when divine and human realms overlapped, when Cain's exiled line merged with ancient peoples and created myths, still sung in Sanskrit chants? Even across the oceans, in the Americas, we hear the same refrains. The Maya spoke of gods descending to teach astronomy and mathematics. The Inca told of Viracocha, the great bearded god who walked among them, teaching them arts and laws before vanishing across the sea. The Hopi remember the Kachinas, spirit beings who visited and taught sacred dances. Different lands, same motif. Outsiders, teachers, hybrids, lost civilizations. All fragments, all echoes, all pointing back east of Eden. And then there is the flood. Nearly every culture remembers it. The Sumerians called it the flood of Ziusudra. The Akkadians told of Atrahasis, the Babylonians of Utnapishtim, the Hebrews of Noah, the Greeks of Deucalion, the Hindus of Manu. Why would so many cultures across the globe all tell the same story unless they were remembering a real event? A cataclysm that swept away the world of Nod, the world of hybrids, the world Cain built. The flood wasn't just punishment for sin. It was a reset, a cleansing of a corrupted age when the boundaries between divine and human were blurred beyond recognition. But even after the flood, the memory persisted. Babel rose, cities flourished, giants reappeared. The myths continued, and perhaps they continue still, encoded in our DNA, preserved in our stories, whispered in our restless dreams. So what does this mean for you? It means that when you hear of Zeus, or Enki, or Osiris, or Viracocha, you may not just be hearing myths. You may be hearing distorted memories of real encounters. Encounters between Adam's covenant line and the people east of Eden. Encounters that shaped human destiny, that produced civilizations, that left ruins and bloodlines still with us today. Could it be that Cain's fear was the first chapter in a story that became global myth? Could it be that Nod was not just a land, but a civilization that seeded legends across the world? And here is where theology converges with myth. Because the Bible never hides the truth that Adam was a representative, not the only human. Paul calls Jesus the last Adam, not the only man. Adam was the first priest, the first covenant partner. Jesus was the ultimate priest, the ultimate covenant partner. And if that's true, then the story of Eden and Nod is not about who was first, but who was chosen. Not about who existed, but about who bore the calling. Adam's failure was cosmic. Jesus' victory was cosmic. Both affected not just one family but all families, all nations, all descendants of Nod and Eden alike. And so we are left with a haunting realization. The myths of the world may all be fragments of one great truth. A truth of two creations, two peoples, two destinies. A truth of Adam chosen, Cain exiled, Nod flourishing, the flood erasing, Christ redeeming. A truth hidden in plain sight, disguised as folklore, dismissed as legend, but carrying the weight of memory. But the story isn't over. Because if the myths are fragments of truth, then what about the ruins we have yet to uncover? What about the lost texts still buried under sands? The DNA still hidden in ancient bones? The prophecies still encoded in forgotten languages? What forbidden secrets lie waiting in the ruins of Sumer, in the sands of Egypt, in the jungles of Central America, in the ice of Siberia? What if the land of Nod is still out there, waiting to be found? Not just in myth, not just in scripture, but in stone. The story continues. The mystery deepens. The people Cain feared may yet reveal themselves in ways we cannot imagine. And when they do, will we recognize them? Will we see them not as monsters, but as our ancestors, our cousins, our forgotten kin? The truth is waiting, and in the next chapter of this exploration, we'll dive into the prophecies themselves, the whispers of Enoch, the warnings of apocalyptic texts, the hidden messages erased from the canon. Because the land of Nod is only the beginning. The forbidden history still has deeper secrets to tell. The story isn't over, and the next revelation may shake everything you thought you knew about humanity, divinity, and your place in the cosmos.